Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the main event. You are here for a Euros podcast this time with me, Daniel.
And Aaron.
Aaron, we've had a few people ask us if we'd like to get stuck into the Euros fantasy football game. We were a little unsure. It's been a long, hard Champions League season. We are going to go again next year, and that's obviously a lot of work. So we have decided to put together three more reasonable size podcasts for everyone. One thing that I have seen on Twitter is a lot of people asking for everything all in one. Really hard when there's 24 teams, but we are going to try our best to fit it all into three. Starting with this one. So the format for the three, first of all, we are going to go over, this is a bit more of a beginner podcast, the rules, strategies, and just general tips to succeed. This is a different game to FPL. This is very similar, minus the ball recovery points, to the Champions League game, which we've been playing regularly for the last couple of years. So we are going to try to apply some of the things that we've learned from that game and put them into this one. Our second podcast is going to be a quick fire flash podcast. So basically, myself and Aaron are going to have 1 minute each to talk about every team. So we aren't going to do what we normally do for the Champions League group previews, where we go through every group and every team in good detail, because for that competition, each team will play 6 games. For this competition, there are 6 games in total for the group. So I just don't think it requires that much of a deep dive. And then lastly, we are going to go through some other players that have been sort of highly bought. A lot of people are looking into them, a few traps and things like that. Maybe things that we couldn't quite squeeze into episode 2, but hopefully it'll be enough for everyone to get the teeth stuck into without wasting hours of sunshine, as it's so beautiful at the minute, looking into. After all, there should be fun and not a headache. So Aaron, are you ready?
I am ready. I feel like with a lot of people, they're getting like really, really into this. But I feel with international football, it's almost depends more on individual quality. So that's what we're hopefully going to try and identify is the individual quality, because I've noticed from looking into these teams, a lot of them play the same sort of formations and system, and then just let the players do the rest. So we'll see what happens and just enjoy it, because all the work starts when the Champions League starts for us.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hope we don't do too badly, though. Yeah. So do you want to talk to us about the basic rules, first of all, Aaron?
So the rules are pretty much similar to FPL, except if you penalties, there's a little bit of a difference with them. If you manage to win a penalty for your team, you get 2 points instead of an assist. If you were the person on the other team who gave the penalty away, you get points deducted. But you also get an extra point for goals outside the box for any of these players. So if you get someone who takes free kicks, their appeal kind of goes up as well. And unlike the Champions League one, there's no ball recovery points, which is kind of sad. But other than that, the rules are very similar to FPL, and hope that made sense to people who were unsure about some of the chips.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have went through the rules, which is why we wanted to really briefly touch on them. If there's any confusion, just get us on Twitter at UCL Fantasy Pod. Nelly said it Euros Fantasy Pod there at UCL Fantasy Pod. Just tweet us and we'll let you know any of the rules. We are proficient in them now. On to, I think, the main issue with this game, that's captaincy changes and manual subs. So really, really briefly to touch on the manual subs rule. If you make a manual substitute in between the game days, you do not get automatic substitutions. You only get automatic if you don't touch anything. But with the captaincy changes, this is one of the most important things to consider. So you don't need a captain for every day, but you definitely want one for the first 3 game days. A last game day captaincy means that you've had a pretty shocking result in the first 3 days. So I wouldn't be too conflicted if you don't have one. If you do have one, fantastic. It's better to be safe than sorry, but it doesn't need to be a super big hitter, your Ronaldos. It can just be anyone that plays on that last day, because ultimately, if you've blanked for the first three, then anything will do for the end. What I will say is one of the great things is obviously there does come a point of risk versus reward. So your player could actually score a goal, but you might think, actually, you know what? The next day, someone's got an even easier fixture. What do I do? How do I decide? For me, I always say this on our Champions League podcast. I work it out sort of as if it was money. And am I gambling for the correct amount of upskill, basically? So if a striker scores one goal, and that's it, there's no bonus points in this game. He just scores from inside the box, nice and easy, 6-pointer, double to 12. And then I'm looking, do I want to switch my captaincy to another forward? Essentially, really what I'm risking here is 4 points or £4 if I was to work it out money-wise. What am I expected to get for that risk of £4? I can either lose it, earn it straight back, or maybe get to 8. And that's sort of where you've got to make your decisions. What are you comfortable doing? And this game favors certain types of players, and those are the players that can be maverick when it's needed, but also know when they're onto a good thing. And it's crazy to see how many people get sucked into wanting to make a change, but also how many people are absolutely petrified to. And that is going to be the key thing here. Can you make the correct captaincy changes? Because half the time it's not even who you put it on, it's who you're taking it off, which is so fascinating. So really just try and work out the maths. What are you likely to win and what are you likely to lose off these players? What you're expecting, and is that upside worth it and is the downside worth it? And only you can answer that question. But make sure you've got a captaincy for at least the first 3 game days, if not the 4th.
Mm-hmm. I like what you say in the Champions League one, where because of this rule, it allows you to try and target the players with the highest ceiling in the first few,
Yeah,
then target the safe floor in the later match days. So
exactly. If you've got Harry Kane and Lukaku in your team, they play on different days, and you think Harry Kane is a shoe-in for a captaincy pick, go for a differential in the Belgium game. Like, if they come off, then you're ahead of everyone. If Lukaku does score one, then can Kane match that? Of course, Kane can match Lukaku. They can match each other. I'm choosing Kane over Lukaku here because he plays second, so it would never be the other way around at this stage of the competition anyway. Maybe later on that might be different, but you can go for differentials in the first few games. Picking attacking wing backs or fullbacks for like match day 1s and 2s can be a lot of fun. UCL, I got a little bit of a joke in one of my Twitter groups for this. Obviously, you talk about Angelino a lot for the UCL when we're in those groups, but he got 18 points on match day 1 this season. If you captained him as your differential and then go safe for a Lewandowski and Mbappe type player for the second game, like the upside's just absolutely massive. So yeah, it is definitely worth taking risks in the early stages. I'd probably avoid goalkeepers and things like that. Goalkeepers can be fairly safe picks towards the end if you think they're going to get a clean sheet. But if you've got an Italian player plus like up front and Donnarumma, for example, go for whatever Italian player you've got in attacking position, and hopefully they're a differential for you. Take the risk. Go for a wing back if there is an attacking wing back playing for one of these teams. You might get something out of it.
No, definitely. And I think one of the questions and a little bit of the confusion I've seen is that I had someone who I saw on Twitter and he thought that if you change captain, all of the points acquire, and that's where that risk versus reward. If you take the captain's armband off someone, the double points are no longer a thing for that person.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a little bit of confusion that someone had, but it's just fun. It's a good laugh, and that's all it should be. You can't take fantasy UEFA that
Yeah.
serious. The app doesn't work half the time. So
I cannot wait. Like it is great. I follow quite a lot of FPL accounts, and I watch a lot of FPL sort of YouTube streams when I'm at work. Normally, I'll stick it on, and then I can sort of have one eye on that, one eye while I'm doing my work. Just sort of gets me through the day, really. But it's going to be fun when they start realizing how bad the UEFA Gaming Hub is, and they just start having mini meltdowns. At least, I mean, ball recoveries being taken away has ruined the prospects of certain players, which we can talk about, on the players section. But Kante being a firm choice for his money. But at the same time, there isn't going to be any of this. He's got 3 ball recovery points in 6 minutes. Oh, he's down to 1 ball recovery point in total.
yeah.
It's up, it's down, it's around. I mean, Kurtzova in the Champions League at one point had a penalty won, a penalty conceded. I think they'd put 3 yellow cards on him. It was just an absolute nightmare. All over. I think the points ended up working out all right by the time you'd added and deducted them all. So get used to that. If the Gaming Hub app changes between the games and when it sort of updates overnight, just don't complain. It's knackered. Like, fair enough, if you want to send a letter or an email to UEFA or the Gaming Hub, whoever runs it. I mean, please do, but we don't want to see it on Twitter. We all know about it. It's rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
Going into strategies, a little bit different to both FPL and the Champions League game with wildcard, just because there's less games, there's half the amount of games within the group stages. And that's where a lot of people like to use the chips. So there are sort of even 2 well-known strategies in the Champions League game, and that is Limitless game week 2, wildcard game week 3, and Limitless game week 2 or 3, and wildcard quarterfinals. With this, I do see quite an easy route, and that is what everyone's been talking about. It took them a little while to get there. I saw a lot of game week 2 wildcard, game week 3 limitlesses, but eventually it did kind of turn to the more sensible quarterfinal standard wildcard. Sorry, the amount of teams that you have knocked out because you just get it wrong is absolutely ridiculous. If you were so good at guessing all the teams that are going to get through that next stage of the competition, right after the group stages, then you'd be winning thousands betting, but you're playing this game instead. So, like, know your limits. And that is something that we've had to do on this podcast, just know our limits. Like, whatever we guess, we might get some points out of it, but we could very well be wrong. And having a wild card to get you out the crap is so, so important. And one of the reasons for the Champions League game not using limitless and standard wildcards between match day 4 and 6 is the rotation. A lot of the big teams are already through or getting there or comfortable. And if they're not, then would you really want to get those players in anyway? With this, there's only 3 game days. So for game day 3, we are likely to see lots and lots of rotation. If you want to try and guess that, be our guest. I think you're a very brave person to guess rotation. I don't think it would be great to use a chip then. That being said, it could be a massive differential. With the Champions League games, you get prizes for each match day. So if you're top for match day 1 in the world or whatever, you get like, I don't know, like a bag and a copy of FIFA 98 or something stupid. I don't know if that you get stuff like that for this game. So if you fancy a 1 week prize, then maybe use your wild card or your limitless in match day 3, because it could probably be a differential, I'd imagine, over everyone who is limitless in match day 2. But it is the smartest way to go, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I think while I've fell victim to that in my first season in the Champions League, where I wasn't able to field a full 11 because there's only 7 match days. The points are going to be so tight. like it's going to come down to like 1 point, and that'll determine like hundreds in the rankings. Like it's going to be very close. And so if you don't have people playing in the final because you got the chips wrong, I think, and then you have to take a hit, I think that's going to be huge on rank and stuff, because there's not many games. Like it's very, very close. So I think definitely what I'm going to do, just from playing the Champions League game before, even though there's not the first and second legs, but yeah, I'm just saving my wild card for in case I get any, pardon me, any predictions wrong in the knockout stages. For Limitless, I'm seeing a lot of like people using it in the group stage, which is, it's almost recommended in the Champions League one because you get an extra transfer back. So, but I was just trying to look at the rules there, and I couldn't see that you get a transfer back in this game. So, Limitless probably is still better to do in the group stage, but 2 seasons ago in the Champions League, I used it in the semi-final and climbed like huge up the ranks. So I'd probably still say that the group stage is probably better, probably match day 2, because you know that everyone is still fielding their strongest 11s. But I've seen other people try and do it to try and combat that rotation. So be interesting to see what people do with that. But yeah, that's all I would say, is probably do Limitless in the group stage, other one in the knockouts.
The other one, the wild card. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely agree. So let's just jump on to some tips to succeed. I think a lot of people know the rules now. We just want to sort of make sure just so that we weren't excluding anyone. So these are just things that we've learned from the Champions League game and in FPL in general, but definitely the Champions League game, as in the Champions League game is 13 or 14 rounds, 13, I think it is. And in this one, there's going to be even less. So this isn't, a case of I'm going to pick this player and I'm going to have him for 8 weeks and we'll see how well they do over 8 weeks. It isn't working that way. So my first tip is do not fall into the trap of backups filling in for first team players that are injured, and being aware that when a first team player is injured or suspended or just not available, that the value of the team, but particularly what area of the team they play in, lowers. So the perfect example for this at the minute is the Netherlands. They don't have Van Dijk, who they haven't had for a while. De Ligt went off with a groin injury in their training sessions during the week, so we don't know how he's gonna play. They've said, Blind can come in, but I believe Blind did play in some of the qualifiers anyway with De Ligt. And then Sillerson, who was their first choice goalkeeper. So now they're going to get Tim Krul or Martin Stekelenburg, which are okay goalkeepers. But the fact that you have 3 key players missing from their defense devalues all of the other players in their defense that you're looking at. Van Daal, for example, a lot of people are going for him at 4.5 million. I'm not saying it's not worth the punt, but in my first draft, I had Van Daal and I had Tim Krul, I believe. And looking at it, I just thought, no, if I'm going to punt, go for one of them. And if anything, I don't think Tim Krul is even nailed to be the goalkeeper. So he's definitely going out. But that's just the way we've got to look at things. If there's so many times where we've done our review podcasts of a team and just went, as soon as I saw this, I knew this was going to happen. Barcelona PSG game, when Piqué came back after 4 months of injury, hadn't played a game, got thrusted straight in, and there was an issue at right back as well. And we just turned around and sort of what we had the conversation, and Nathan went, yeah, I've got to captain Mbappe now, and Mbappe scored a hat-trick. There are signs that we should look out for here that players aren't like for like. This isn't FIFA where it's just like, just take him out and put him in. Yeah, he's not as quick, but whatever. They all have different strengths and weaknesses, and they are there to be exploited. Germany in particular, whoever they're playing at right back or right wing back, depending whether they go 4 or 5 at the back, there is an opportunity there for them to be exploited. That's what we need to look at. It's not just a case of this team is good, therefore I can have anyone from their defense. If players are missing, they're devalued.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with that. Following on from kind of what you were saying, just a tip that I've seen that's helped me is, unlike FPL, where your third sub probably isn't going to play, and so you can kind of just try and make them the most budget player ever. In this game, I think the fuller your team is, the more starters that you've got in your full 15, it really, really helps you out. Because if someone does blank, so say if Lukaku only gets 2 points and you had to like forfeit one of your bench positions to try and afford Lukaku in the first place, if that person, saying, I think his name's Nego, for example, he's in a lot of teams, we don't know if he's going to start, but people have him because he's so cheap. You're going to lose out on points when you could have tried to work out your finances a little bit differently and had actually a starter in there instead. And then that person could have potentially got maybe 3 or 4 points, which is still more than what Lukaku got. So having a full playing bench and making full use of that rotation, I think, is huge for this game. And I think is a difference between people doing well and not.
I think just to follow on from that, there is the question of what are you getting for your money? And that's a case of, yes, it's great to have a playing bench. I totally agree with you. However, if one of your starters on your bench is 5.5 million, I'm looking through these players. Are there any players under 6 million that are likely to get an attack in return? And for me, I cannot really see any. Mm-hmm. Now, I think you've got 2 options. I think you sacrifice one of your bench players, only one, not 3s and 4s. I've seen teams with Hulles, who's a midfielder, and Nego, who's a midfielder. One's 4.5 and one's 4. And, you know, I don't quite get that. So if you can sacrifice one of your players, so for example, getting a Nego in to then allow you to afford to get players in and around the 7-8 million, I think that's absolutely viable, because we've got to remember, we can still only play 11 people. You still want a low scoring bench. You still want your starting 11 to do well. And if a player on your bench facilitates a starter that can do more, then that'll be advisable. Because there's no ball recovery points in this game, it's so stupid. That is where players can get 4 or 5 points. Kante got 6 points in the final of the Champions League without getting an attack in return, because he got 9 ball recoveries and he got a clean sheet. So that would be the other way to go. If you're going to pick a player that is 5.5 million or below, make them a player that is a starter for a team that you think will keep a clean sheet, so that they get a glorious 3 points instead of a miserable 2. Mm-hmm. Because every point is important in this game. But I think playing that way kind of, takes away some of the fun. The point system, I don't think they've got it right at all. They've totally devalued so many players. They've made it more FPL-like in terms of, you only really play one way again. Whereas I loved the fact for the Champions League game, you could take some risks in other positions, and you never know what might happen. This, I don't see it so much. So it's great to have a full playing bench. Obviously, if you're going to pick someone that's 4 million, you may as well have them be someone that plays. But I would concentrate on getting, I'd say 13 players overall that you think are just nailed to score your points, and then everyone else can sort of fill in the blanks to get your 2 pointers. Quick thing just to let people know, if your player gets sent off, you can't sub them out. That's just something that I haven't seen anyone mention actually on some of the previews that I've seen. So if you've got Chiesa or Berardi, that seems to be the big issue at the minute for the game day one. If one of those, if the player who starts gets sent off and you've got them in your team, you can't then sub them out with their minus points. They're in. So just keep that in mind. Any more tips from you, Aaron?
No, just I think like what you were saying, because the ball recoveries are taken out, I think one of the biggest things is the 5 substitutions. So someone might be starting and then get taken out before the hour mark, so they only get 1 point. I think that's going to be the biggest reason why some of your players might not get as big points, just because winning the competition has to come first and foremost for some of these teams. I can say that with De Bruyne, when he's eventually fit to play, I can only see him playing limited minutes until the knockouts, because he's someone you don't really need to have a run in the team for him to pick up form. He's so good.
Yeah.
So that's where the substitutions will come really, really handy, just to make sure that them 2 points that someone might get coming off the bench might be better than the 1 point that someone got because they were arrested. And
that's good. It's a good point to make, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think other than that, like just what you mentioned before, don't make any substitutes or captain changes until the lineup is confirmed in that first game, because the deadline is right as kickoff happens. You've got the team sheet. Like if you make a substitute, say you bring on Sterling and he doesn't even start, you've just lost points. So yeah, that's just one of them things for me. There's no rush. It's not the price rises. If it's the same as Champions League, the price rises didn't happen until the match day after, if that makes sense. So like, if loads of people jump on someone for match day 1, their prices didn't go up until match day 3 because it was a match day behind.
It wasn't player bought though. It's based on performances.
On form. Yeah, it's based on form.
But the price changes don't happen until the knockout stages for this. So all prices are the same for the groups. Because in the Champions League game, it's until match day 2 or 3, isn't it? And then it happens. The first couple of match days, there's nothing. And I think my final tip is to have no more than 3 outfield players in your team that are involved in the final game day of each week. So this is sort of split into 2 parts. So it's in terms of the group of death: Portugal, France, Germany, Hungary. You don't want any more than 3 players in total from all of those teams, because you want a full 11 to have played before you have to be dipping into these players. Statistically, it just works out so much better. That's it, like mathematically. Someone worked out for the Champions League, and I think it came out about 20%. I think it might be FPL Facts with Tim. Do you want to give him a follow? If it wasn't you, Tim, have the shout out anyway. Why not? So yeah, the confusing thing for this tournament though is that from match day 2 and 3, the final game day switches. So Spain actually get thrown into that. So for your limitless, it's fine, whatever. But for the final, it's so confusing with the game days, match day thing. The final game day of match day 3, you'll want no more than 3 players from across the teams I've just mentioned, plus Spain and whoever they're playing. I can't remember who they're playing on the last day. So just be aware of that. Otherwise, you are statistically giving yourself a worse chance of accumulating points, as you will have a less clear idea of who to bring out. So that'll be my final tip. Don't go heavy on those final boys, including Spain when they move in. So we will be doing our usual league. The league code will be in the description for this. I know it's pretty rare that we actually show our faces on YouTube, Aaron, but we are going to start trying when there's not loads of us on, making my internet jump up and down everywhere. We are, of course, as ever, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. The rest of it, we're on Twitter, like I mentioned earlier, at UCL Fantasy Pod. So please feel free to ask us any questions. Usually on a Tuesday for Champions League, I'm inundated. It'll be interesting for this. But feel free to ask away. We will try and get back to you when we can. I do usually see them straight away, but if I miss them, I am sorry. We will be back straight after this, pretty much. We're going to record straight away with a flash podcast of a team analysis. So we are going to give ourselves 1 minute each to talk about every single team. That should be fun. So we will see you then. Thank you very much for watching. Bye now.